Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Josh Monday Christian Conspiracy Podcast. I'm your host, Josh Monday. If you don't know me, I'm a Christian rapper, devoted husband, father, and Army veteran. And we have a very special guest for you today. It's Ward Sanford. And I really appreciate you coming on. If you could just introduce our audience to yourself and let us know what you do.
Yeah, I'm Ward Sanford. I've been a Christian for over 50 years. Um, Originally, my career was in the science of hydrology, hydrogeology. I spent 39 years working for the U.S. Geological Survey. But in the last several years, I started to author a series of books called Cry for Jerusalem, historical novels based around the year 70 AD when Jerusalem fell and the temple was destroyed. Um, I got interested in this by looking into some of the writings of a historian named Flavius Josephus. Many of you might have heard of Josephus, and I'd heard of him but didn't wasn't familiar with his writings at all. So when I looked into him, I discovered the writings were kind of dense and read like a history book and was hard to wade through. But I found a modern English translation of his second book called The Jewish Wars, which was all about that time period of where Jerusalem was destroyed. And so I was able to read that, and I was just amazed at all the drama and details of events he described because he was not just a historian, he was one of the main actors in everything that happened at the time. So he had a bird's eye view of everything going on. And once I started reading that, I was like, well, how come nobody's heard of these stories are so dramatic? It's like then I realized, well, somebody put this dense history into a novel form. I bet you it would people would really want to read it. So that's what spawned the idea, and I couldn't put it down. And uh, so I spent my career writing as a scientist, which was much different than writing like a novel. So as a scientist, everything is just the facts, get it as short as and concise as possible. And I thought I might try to write a novel, but I'm like, I have no experience in this, so I hired a professional writer to help me put all the words to the stories and the plots that I developed. So 5 years later, we've got a four book series called Cry for Jerusalem that's available on Amazon.
That's awesome. Amazing. So you got a four-book series and what things because I hear a lot of people bring up Josephus when they debate, like topics like the Trinity and certain things that if they want historical reference from. So what things did you find that was interesting about Josephus that really sparked your interest?
Wow, where do you start? People often quote him because he gives so much context to the first century, and even before that, Jerusalem, Judea, and everything. He just writes all the details that the Bible doesn't address. The Bible's not that kind of a history book, but Josephus provides all that for us. So, and he mentions Jesus. He's one of the main sources of reference to Jesus of Nazareth outside of the Bible. So he gets quoted for that a lot, and yeah, so another interesting thing I discovered, and I've also written like dozens of blogs on these topics on my website, cryforjerusalem.com. And one of the other things he discusses and just mentions throughout his writings, and this was actually picked up by a Josephus scholar back in the 1800s out of Britain. His name was Thomas Lewin, and Josephus really puts together you can put together a layout of Herod's Temple Mount and exactly what it looked like and where the temple was. And Thomas Lewin published all of this, but it got basically buried in a library for over a century until Google eBooks starts going through libraries and scanning books and putting them up online. And then we discover that Josephus really did tell us where the temple was, back in the day.
That's interesting for sure. And also the layout you said, right?
Yeah.
Wow, that's awesome. And did Josephus he also talked about the Tower of Babel a little bit. Did can you get into that?
Wow. Well, Josephus's other big book was like called the Antiquities.
Uh-huh.
That was the entire kind of parallels everything in the Old Testament. It's almost a commentary on the Old Testament where he gives different details. And unfortunately, I've not really read that in any detail, just looked up
Oh, okay.
certain quotes. So I don't know what he says about the, but he
It's a
says interesting things about the flood, even, for
oh, okay.
example, that might not have been, that
Oh, okay.
people might not be aware of. Yeah.
Are you familiar with what he said about the flood or no?
A little bit. In fact, I actually wrote a blog on that one too, because he mentions even at the time that other main historians of the time, and Josephus had access to the library at Alexandria,
Oh man.
which hadn't been burned yet. So he had access to all of these other world histories from the Babylonians, the Greeks, the Egyptians, and they all had a major flood story. It wasn't just the Bible and the Jews, these other, and they also mentioned that if you visited Armenia, which was a lot bigger country at the time, you could go to this mountain, and people claimed that the remnants of the ark were on the mountain, and that people
Wow.
had brought back tar and stuff from the mountain. So that's kind of interesting.
And what science were you involved in, you said? Before you wrote the
Uh,
book?
I was a groundwater scientist at the U.S.
Oh,
Geological Survey.
oh wow. I work for a water district. I work for Rialto Water District, and I'm a production operator. So
Oh, okay.
I'm familiar with what you did. Okay. I was just wondering because you did groundwater. I was thinking because you said you did geological surveys. So I was wondering if you would because you are a Christian, obviously you're going to believe that the flood happened. But there's some scientists that don't believe the
Well,
flood happened.
I have a different take, a little bit different take on the flood, but
You do. Well, I mean, I know you want to talk about Josephus, but would you be okay going into that the flood?
yeah, I wrote a little a story in a newsletter many years ago. I had done some work in the United Arab Emirates, and being a geologist, I'm also an old Earth creationist, not a young
Oh,
Earth creationist.
oh,
And
interesting.
and I don't think there's evidence for a worldwide flood. So when I was over there, I started thinking about how large the Persian Gulf was. And so several thousand years ago, when sea levels were rising, I think there's a really good case to be made that there were dunes that blocked off the Straits of Hormuz.
Hmm.
So when the sea levels rose, they were blocked, and the Tigris and the Euphrates rivers flowed all the way down through what was now the Persian Gulf, which was dry land. I think that was where Eden was. In fact, there were other rivers coming in from Arabia at the time. It was a wetter condition. Those are the Gihon, the Pison mentioned in Genesis.
Uh-huh.
And at some point, the, um, there was a bit of a wet period in the climate, and the monsoons came up and washed out enough of the dunes that suddenly there was a breach, and the entire Persian Gulf flooded over a period of what probably took 6 months to a year. So I think this was actually the where and when the flood occurred with Noah's Ark.
Okay. So yeah, interesting. I'm a young Earth creationist, and so we have two opposite views, but it's okay. On my show, I like to bring all different views and everything, you know. So
Right.
yeah, very interesting. So yeah, I do believe it was a worldwide flood. But that's also, I just like to get other people's um interpretations, obviously. And also, since you're a scientist, I wanted to get that as well. But if you want to dip back into the Josephus stuff, we can. That way we
Yeah,
don't
yeah.
get off course. Because I'll get
Yeah,
off
there's a
course.
there's a lot of rabbit holes people can go down, and I can go down. So
Yeah, yeah. And you know what? And like I said, it's okay because I read the Bible and I feel a certain way. You read the Bible, you feel a certain way, but it doesn't mean I can obviously ask you
right,
about it. I
right.
really enjoy hearing everybody's different views, you know?
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, yeah. So if you want to go back to the Josephus stuff that you kind of know about, because I don't want to, because I'm going off into the Antiphus book, so I don't want to do that either. Probably my questions would probably lean towards that. So, yeah, what would you like to go over about like anything about your book, anything that you feel interesting that you wanted to bring up?
So the book, like I said, is a historical novel series. So we really follow five main characters. through the whole time period and all of the events going on. And so it's not really written as a what would you call it, as a Christian, book that talks about Christians a lot. The idea is to give a context and really make people understand, that these things really happened. Jesus really existed. His disciples were there from the beginning, and the church was there believing what they did from the very beginning. And so our five main characters, I mean, one of them is Josephus himself.
Yeah.
He goes by the name Joseph because Josephus is just the Latin version of Joseph, or Joseph, as they would have called him.
Okay. Perfect.
And at the beginning, and so when you're writing a historical novel, the challenge is to bring in as much history and details as you can, but you also want to make the story dramatic and readable and be a page turner. So you're trying to add things and fill out the drama as you go. So one of the things he mentions is he goes to Rome early on, and his ship capsized at sea. So I took that bit of historical detail and wove that into the beginning of the book. And this is where he meets, most of the other main characters they meet, during this shipwreck. So there's a Roman soldier named Nicanor, and he gets actually mentioned in his book as that he had a friend that was a Roman soldier named Nicanor.
Okay.
So he mentions him a couple times, but we make an entire character out of him, right? And they also meet this what they call highborn Roman noble woman there when they're capsized, and when they go to Rome, they discover she's the best friend of Nero's wife, right? So and she and Joseph have kind of a little crush going, but she's about to be married to the new governor of Judea,
Wow.
who
Nero, right?
no, Nero was the emperor of Rome, but
Yeah,
the
yeah. Oh, okay. I was
the
like,
the
oh,
new governor of Judea, Joseph tells us his name is Gessius Florus, and he's the antagonist of the whole story because it's all about himself. He's going to Judea to make a name for himself and also to try to enrich himself. And the way to do that is you raid the Jewish temple because there's a lot of gold there. So he wants to raid the temple, the gold, and that actually started the entire revolt, which led to the war with the Jews and the destruction and everything.
they,
So who
they
have I
didn't they
mentioned?
didn't they say that there was gold underneath the temple, and then they
Well,
said that they
so
took
yeah,
the whole
what
temple out and they didn't find gold or something, or did they find gold? I couldn't remember which one that one was.
yeah, I don't think they well they do find some gold. What's
Uh-huh.
interesting is in the along with the Dead Sea Scrolls that people have heard of, there was one interesting scroll called the Copper Scroll. Maybe people have heard of that, but that's basically like a treasure list of where treasure's been buried or hidden around Judea or Jerusalem. And so we bring that whole idea of the gold and the treasure and the copper scrolls into the story as well.
Very interesting. Yeah, because when I was doing a Bible study on the temple, like getting taken down, they said that there was no stone left unturned because they were trying to get the gold that was underneath
Well,
the
that
temple.
could be true. They all knew there was a lot of treasure, gold and silver, in the temple treasuries. So certainly they would have been looking for that, right?
Yeah, of
And there was
course.
there's also a lot of gold um surfacing, what would you call that? Gold plating and things on the outside and inside of the temple itself. So when the temple burned, they said a lot of that gold started melting and dripping and flowing down into the seams and between the blocks and the rocks and things. So they were also trying to get all of that out, right?
Yeah, and then in the New Testament, they were walking by the temple, um and Judas was like, I guess it was Judas talking to Jesus, like, look how beautiful the temple looks. Wow, like
Yeah, yeah.
because of the gold, right? Because he had
Yeah, there
that
was
greed
gold on
in
the
him.
outside, right?
He had that greed in him, and then Jesus, quoted about the temple. So that's very interesting. Yeah, so it's nice to have the biblical narrative and then have somebody that's kind of historically there to kind of bring certain things up.
It adds so much context, and
Yeah.
especially, this book series and really picks up where the New Testament ends, because the New Testament ends with Paul showing up in Rome at the end of Acts, and we're really picking up from that point on, saying, okay, what happened between that point and 70 AD when Jerusalem was destroyed, and a lot happened.
Yeah, it seems like it. Yeah, because the and yeah, it gets that's very interesting that it actually picks up from there, and then you get to see, and then get like a bird's eye view of what was happening.
Right,
That's
right.
really interesting. Yeah, I think that helps. So so the writings that you studied was all about that whole era right there, where the temple got destroyed and all that stuff,
Yeah,
right?
his book called The Jewish Wars actually starts back in Herod and describes, for example, all the Judean governors and everything, all the politics that was going on with the high priests, and mentioned the high priests that are in the not only in the New Testament, he lists all the high priests that were there between Herod and the New Testament and time period and everything that was going on. He mentions that uh, uh, the leader of the church, James, was executed,
Um,
um,
talks
and
about it.
things about the early church, right?
Is the stuff about the disciples that got executed or crucified and everything? Is that where people get that historical? How
No,
they?
I think that comes out of church writings,
Okay,
early
okay,
church writings. I think
okay.
Josephus only mentions James. He also mentioned John the Baptist,
Oh,
which was
okay.
yeah.
So yes, it's so. And then was Josephus Christian?
No, he was Jewish. Some
He was
people
Jewish.
wonder because of the way he wrote what people call the testimonium about Jesus. And some people think, well, maybe the Christians came and sort of embellished it a little bit, and that's possible. But clearly, to me, what he has written, a lot of it, he's either telling from what he knew or what he realized people believed at the time.
And what was his position? Because if he said you said that he was kind of falling in love with the woman that was Nero's wife's best friend. So it seems like he was kind of higher up in government. Did he have some kind of governmental position or maybe high priest position? Do you
He
know?
never said he had a government position. He was part of the upper class. He actually said his mother was descended like 5 generations back from one of the earlier Judean kings. So
Oh,
he sort of claims royal bloodline, but
some
his
nobility.
his father might have even been in the Sanhedrin. So he spent some time learning from the Pharisees and the Essenes as well. So
That's interesting. Yeah,
yeah.
because I wanted to see what his position was. He gets brought up quite a lot.
Well,
Um,
the other really interesting part of his life was, so because he had been to Rome, and when the Romans started to invade under the general Vespasian, they came in with 4 legions to invade, and they knew they were going to start up north in Galilee. He was assigned to be the general in charge of defending Galilee.
wow.
So he went up there, but he knew he was outnumbered. But they got into this fortified little town city up there, which in the book we call Yotapta, and you can actually visit the place. I visited that spot up in northern Israel. When I went there in 2019, it's actually a little national park. There's kind of a hill that this was built on. It was fortified with walls, and the Romans laid siege to it for about 30 or 40 days, and he was in charge there. And when they finally captured it, they captured him and brought him before Vespasian. And normally somebody like that might have been executed or even crucified. But what he told them was he had seen a vision
Uh-huh.
of a man coming down to Israel who was going to be the leader of the world. And he was he was basically thinking of and quoting a prophecy about this that we all now as Christians seem to clearly see that it's talking about Jesus being the king of the world. But he applies this, and when he comes before Vespasian and sees him, he says, "Hail, leader! To you, leader of the world." And Vespasian's like, "Wait a minute, what's this guy talking about? I'm not the emperor, and I have no designs on being emperor." And there's lots of politicians that would get there first, but he's basically telling me this
Like the
uh
prophecies
it-
about
pro
him.
the prophet, this somehow this prophecy, he's giving me an omen that that some future day I'm going to be emperor. So it makes him curious enough that he doesn't execute him. He keeps him around in chains, because he also realizes this guy is well educated. He's fluent in Greek and Latin, so he can communicate really well with them. He knows a lot about Jerusalem. So he keeps him around partly out of that interest, but thinking, well, maybe this guy can help us when we lay siege to Jerusalem. He can tell us some interesting things we need to know. So he's kept around with the emperor and the Romans. And lo and behold, a few years later, there's a civil war that goes on in Rome. New emperors try to be emperor, but are overthrown, and eventually Vespasian himself does become emperor.
Wow.
So they're thinking like, wow, this guy Josephus has some divine insights. We now treat him much differently. We'll actually set him free from his chains.
Wow.
And he put his son Titus then became the general who actually attacked Jerusalem. So here's Josephus now over with the Romans. He was set free, but he didn't leave them and go back to Jerusalem. He sort of saw himself as the self-appointed liaison to
Yeah.
the Romans, and his goal actually was try to convince the Jews to surrender Jerusalem so that the Romans wouldn't destroy the city and the temple.
Wow.
But then, of course, he failed. And from the Jewish standpoint, in Jerusalem, they're looking at this guy that used to be on their side, now over with the Romans, telling them who knows what secrets about Jerusalem. So Josephus got labeled as the traitor, right? And for centuries, he's always been, well, by the Jews for a long time, and by some today even, was considered a traitor. And then actually, after the war, he went to Rome. He virtually became friends with Titus. Went to Rome. Titus put him up in an apartment right there by his palace where he could sit and write history. And that's the point where he wrote down all this history that was preserved for the Jews. If he hadn't written all that history, we wouldn't know a lot of this stuff.
Wow. That is crazy because he kind of became like a Joseph almost to the
He
emperor.
did, yeah.
Yeah, I think he knew the Old Testament and he probably was like, you know what?
Maybe he saw himself
I'm
as a
gonna
Joseph.
right.
He's
Yeah,
even got the same name, right?
yeah,
So
I know. Yeah, Joseph.
I'm the New Testament Joseph going on here.
I,
Yeah.
I wrote down Joseph right here too. So I was like, wow, I think he's trying to I think he mimicked that and just to stay alive. That's really
Yeah,
interesting.
yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, yeah, and even presented a vision like Joseph did to the Pharaoh, right?
Yeah, and like he was probably banking on him becoming emperor. If he didn't become emperor, he probably knew he was probably done for. So once he became emperor, he was probably very excited about that. So man, wow, that's really interesting stuff. So I like the way it goes because I mean I've never this is new to me, so I've never really
Yeah,
studied Josephus, but I've just heard about him obviously, and I've heard about his writings, and he gets brought up in debates, and this is really interesting stuff. So
yeah. I mean that's 99% of people. That's exactly where I was before I picked it up and started reading it. I'm like, oh my gosh, look at all this stuff that we just never get taught or never hear about.
yeah, and so and he was alive during the time that Jesus was alive, or was he just like a just right after it?
No, he was born, I think, in like 37. So he
Okay.
was born a few years afterwards, but his father would certainly have been alive at the time and would have remembered
Yes.
this guy, Jesus of Nazareth. The Christians at the time were called the Nazarenes, after
Y-
Nazareth. So,
Yeah, and how come he gets brought up during Trinity debates, Josephus? Do you know why? I mean, is did he write anything about maybe Jesus being God or anything like, or people
well,
believing that Jesus was God?
he certainly says Jesus was the Messiah, but probably saying this is in reference to this is what the Christians believe, right? That he was the Messiah. I'm not sure I don't remember exact wording. He might have actually said he was the Son of God, the Messiah,
Okay, okay, I see.
but not from his own personal beliefs, just from what
Of
he
course, he was
knew the
Jewish, so
Christians. Yeah,
you can't say that. Yeah, so they have to denounce that. But so he's basically just giving us historical reference of what Christians believed at the time. And he said that he did talk about James being executed, which
he
is
definitely mentioned
Jesus
James being executed. In fact, the high
Jesus's
priest
brother.
who had him executed was not allowed to do that.
Yeah.
Like even in Jesus' time, they weren't allowed to pronounce the death sentence. The Romans had to.
Yes.
So when the high priest at the time had James executed, the Romans that ticked off the Romans, and they immediately deposed him as high priest for doing that.
Yeah, because like even when they brought Jesus, the woman to get stoned, like they're not allowed to do that at that time, right? So
Yeah,
they were putting
yeah,
him in an awkward position
right,
to
right.
either follow Roman law or follow their
Jewish
law.
law, yeah,
Yeah. Wow. So and then James, he records James being executed, which that's good historical context. And then you said
right.
the other deaths
He
were
mentions
early
John
church
the
fathers.
Baptist. Yep.
And he mentioned him getting his head cut off also.
Don't remember if he mentions the type of execution.
Oh, but just the
I
execution.
think he mentioned he was killed by Herod, right?
Okay. Okay. So
Certainly mentions Herod, all the Herod Agrippa. I mean, all of those are real characters. I mean,
yeah,
real people. He
yeah,
mentions all of them, right? So,
yeah. So do regular historians ever like ones that don't believe in Jesus? Do they believe that Jesus was alive? I mean, I don't know if you want to go into that, but do they believe Jesus lived, but they just don't believe he was the Messiah or anything with God?
well,
Or
I mean, there are a few people, and it's a very popular thing to say that, well, we don't even know that Jesus was alive, but
yeah,
most, I would say more than 90% of legitimate historians acknowledge it just because from other references like both Josephus, there's a Roman Tacitus that describes who the Christians are and who Christ was executed under Pontius Pilate. So I think there's little doubt in most historians that he was really a person that lived at the time.
yes, awesome. Well, it's great to have some insight from someone like Josephus to add to that. So definitely awesome. Um, okay, so he ends up in Rome. Did he live out his life same way with the Romans and everything? And how did he end up finishing up his? He
Yeah,
just kind
well,
of
he
was.
was there several years. Vespasian was emperor for several years. So they came back from Jerusalem, and what's interesting is that fact they took all that treasury money they raided from the temple and used that to build the Colosseum.
Oh wow!
So the Colosseum's there, and there's even a stone nearby that says this was built with money from foreign wars, right?
Oh my
So
goodness! So they ended up building the Colosseum where there's a bunch of death and
yeah,
wow, and sports too. Like kind of that's like
yeah.
kind of where sports originated from.
Vespasian was alive several years. So when he was interesting, when he was writing, that you can tell that Titus then became his son became the next emperor. And you can tell when Josephus was writing, Titus was already emperor because often in his writings, when he's describing Titus as the general going around the battles doing this or that, he would call him Caesar. He'd say, well, then Caesar took, some of the soldiers and went over here. So he was already given Titus that title. So you realize he was writing this uh, uh, after like 90, the year 90 when Titus had become, or 80 maybe when Titus had become emperor or become, yeah, emperor.
So to the Jews, he's the traitor, and they absolutely they don't like him. Basically
Yeah,
back then.
I'm sure there were people that were out to try to assassinate him for what he had done, which was part of the reason he probably wanted the protection of the emperor
Yeah.
to to stay safe from people who wanted him killed.
Man, how interesting. And he ended up living that whole time because usually what happens is you might be divine to the guy's dad, but when they take over, you're nothing anymore. That's what usually happens. You
Right,
see that
right.
happening with
Unfortunately, he had become virtually friends with both the Vespasian emperor and his son Titus. So
smart guy who wants to keep his life.
yeah,
Because we see that with Joseph, he was good with the one Pharaoh, and then
yeah. But then another
down the
pharaoh
line,
rose, right? Yep.
yeah, they get power, and then they're just like, we don't care about these people, and they
Yeah,
turn them
right.
into slaves. How interesting! Wow.
Yeah, there the famous line, there arose a pharaoh who knew not Joseph, right? So
Yes, exactly, and that was it. Yep. Whoa, interesting stuff. And then, do you, so Josephus, also, I mean, do you have any? Well, you said that he talks about the Old Testament in the other book, right? Not in the book that
right.
you
Another
studied.
thing he brings up that people aren't aware of is that there was this group of specialized Jewish rebels at the time. They were called the Sicari.
Mm.
And that's named after their little short curved swords that they carried that were called Sicari. That was the name of the, so they were called the Sicari. They were basically Jewish assassins that went around looking, try to assassinate, especially anybody who was a Roman collaborator.
Oh, wow.
So we were able to bring this into the story, right? We give Josephus a younger sister, and she end up falling in and becoming one of these Sicari members in secret that her family and her parents don't know about, right? So,
Are they like a secret society kind of?
well, yeah, yeah, they're kind of secret. People don't know who they are, right?
Yeah.
So they say one of the things they'll do is out in public, they'll quickly stab somebody with their sword and then pretend like they're one of the crowd, shocked and running away. It's like so people don't really
Wow.
they're
And
not
this is
they don't do this out in the open. They secretly going around,
the Sicari. So I want to definitely look into them. So, and this is true. This is not just part of your book. This is actually the
Although this
Sicari
is
was true.
true, people have actually written books about who the
Wow.
Sicari were.
Wow.
Yeah.
I want to look into that. The Sicari. Wow. Very interesting. So, the Sicari, and then were the Sicari were since they were hitmen, so were they do you think that they were hired by like the high priest or hired by do you know
No,
anything about
the
them?
high priest they didn't like him either because the Sicari didn't like the priests in the ruling class. In fact, the
Okay.
rebels that were in charge that really took on the rebellion and threw out the Romans, way back way back a few years earlier in 66 is when they
Okay.
first kicked the Romans out. So the Jews were back in charge of Judea from 66 through 70. And so these rebels had huge followings, thousands of believers, and they're the ones that took over Jerusalem. They didn't like the moderates; they just saw them all as collaborators with Rome. The moderates were just trying to keep the peace. Well, they didn't want to keep the peace; they wanted Rome completely out.
Wow.
So yeah, so there were two main rebels that were vying for control of Jerusalem during these years inside the city, and they were fighting each other. Right? So they had the city divided between themselves and were both fighting to be the top dog the whole time, shooting at each other and all of that. And even got to the point where they had huge food supplies stored up in Jerusalem in case of a siege. But these two rebels, in order to try to beat the other one, they burned each other's food supplies.
Wow.
And just as that happened, like the following week, the Romans show up to lay siege on the city. So now they're in a position where the Romans are there and they've managed to burn their own food supplies. So really bad timing. And so that in fact led to the famine that happened when the Romans laid siege. Most of the city died from the famine because the Romans had them completely surrounded.
Wow. The Sicari, very interesting. I wonder who kind of because they were like a I mean, it says here if when I look it up, they're like a group of like they're almost like ninjas, the way that they
Yeah,
they
yeah.
work.
That's how.
I wonder who organized these guys because I mean, obviously maybe they just got sick of the Romans what they were doing and but they weren't like attacking Romans because obviously that would make it so that they
Yeah, there weren't any Romans really in the city, but there were
yeah,
certainly Roman
defectors.
collaborators or those they suspected of being collaborators, right? So they had their eye on certain targets in the city.
Yeah, it just for me, I mean, there had to be somebody that kind of put these guys together though, that
Yeah,
that were in power. Like I don't know, like it seemed like the church was the ones that were in power at the time. Not the church, but the
the
high
Jewish people.
priest.
Yeah, but they didn't. Yeah, these were separate rebels.
Wow. It's like, man, because they had to have some kind of training, something put together for them to be like this. Because as I'm kind of looking at reading about them as you're talking, like they seem like they have some high level training,
Yeah,
what they were
I don't know
doing.
where they originally got their training. They actually started up after Jesus was there.
Yeah.
If you watch the season The Chosen, they sort of almost make Judas not who's the guy that's the one that's like the soldier amidst them was part of this trained rebel group. I don't know why I'm not thinking of his name.
So it's
Um,
okay.
Simon was it?
Oh,
Was it
okay.
Simon?
So
they almost make him out to be one of the Sicari, but the Sicari
Uh,
really didn't start up being the Sicari until after that. So
so they kind of show like that portion maybe as like a hint to that, but
yeah,
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 man, yeah, because I want to I'm gonna probably gonna look into them because that's interesting because I like it kind of it's interesting to me like secret society groups or groups that get put together like this
right,
because
right.
they are
Yeah, I wrote a blog about that. I like who are the Sicari, and if you Google who the Sicari or who are they, my blog will show up very close to the top. So
yeah, because I haven't heard of them, and I think that's
yeah,
just interesting. Who yeah, because I'm just gonna put it in my phone just so I look it up later because I want to read about it. What you wrote about it? Who are the Sicari? Yeah, because that man, very interesting because they they didn't become an army to go against the Romans. They're actually going against the people that just defected. So
yeah.
to
I mean, they
me,
were against the Romans, but they didn't have access necessarily to
yeah, and
it.
they couldn't form an
It's
army to go against them,
yeah,
obviously.
it's easier to pick off soft targets who are collaborators, right?
Of course. The Sicari carried daggers and murdered Roman officials. Wow. Very, very interesting. All right, well, I'm going to look into this. I want to read what you wrote about it. Cry for Jerusalem. You're the first one that pops up.
Okay, there we go.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Wikipedia obviously pops up, but you're right after that. So perfect.
yeah,
Jewish assassins were the Sicari. Okay, well, I'm gonna go ahead and keep this, and everybody that's listening, yeah, check that out. That's so it's Ward Sanford, and it's May 31st, 2021. He wrote about them because I don't know
yeah.
about you guys, but that kind of stuff interests me because it's almost like the Jesuits or something, and from the Catholic Church, it's kind of very similar to that,
Right. They're like the Jewish ninjas, right?
like the assassins. Yeah.
They sneak around, yeah, in disguise.
Wow. Yeah, because it would almost seem to me that I don't think that just a group of people would just come together and be like, "Hey, let's become ninjas." Like it's almost
Yeah,
like they were
yeah.
formulated, they were trained, no one
They were
really knew
trained
about
by
them.
somebody. There's a book out there about it. I think I read, but I forget what they were saying. And they mentioned a couple people who were probably there toward the beginning of it, but how they got trained, not
Yeah,
sure.
yeah, very interesting. Yeah, because wow, and yeah, all right. Well, that'll be something that I can look into, and everybody that's listening, if you guys want to know the title, it's the Jewish assassins who are the Sicari. And that's his blog that he wrote about. And it's something that I think that's I don't know about interesting you guys. I mean, I was in the military, I was in the army, so that kind of stuff interests me. And also
Yeah.
secret societies, and that's almost like a secret society within within them. So
Yeah,
um,
I mean, we did a lot of research also, into the Roman military techniques and everything. So,
yeah,
for example, I heard of you see things in the Middle East, I mean the Middle Ages, where they had siege engines where they would throw rocks up against the walls. This is very old technology. The Romans had all of that stuff too. They knew how to build weapons and things to lay sieges to cities. So I thought that was very interesting, and all their military tactics
yeah,
and
yeah, they
and
were
and
powerful, right?
ja the kinds of javelins and different swords that they use and stuff. Yeah, they were highly trained, the legions.
And it's interesting that the Romans, were like this, and then they ended up becoming the Roman Catholic Church. I think that's interesting how it kind of flipped,
Yeah,
right?
well, when the Emperor Constantine came in and became emperor and converted to Christianity, Christianity eventually sort of becomes the national religion. Even so, there
kind of
and
a
then
kind of a mixture though, huh? Between Mithraism and Christianity probably at first because he was
yeah,
worshiping Mithra, right?
there was still a lot of paganism practiced a lot
Yeah.
throughout the area. So yeah,
And that was like at 325, so that was
right, right.
a little after Josephus, right? Wow. Man, very interesting stuff. I really like your knowledge and how I could bring one thing up and then boom, you could do a whole you could talk for 10 minutes about the one thing I bring up. I really love
Right,
that.
right.
You got
Yeah,
a
so
lot of knowledge.
I've written dozens of blogs about all of these different sort of subjects, and
Yeah, I'm gonna be
they get a lot
definitely
of reads. Yeah, it's under cryforjerusalem.com, right? The blog series.
I'm gonna be digging into all this stuff, and then I'll probably have you back on to kind of to just talk about these different areas, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, if things go right, right now I've got a producer in Hollywood, and we're trying to get this thing produced as a series on Amazon or Netflix. So
awesome. I think that would be
Yeah.
great. Just the little portions that you're talking about, I could see that coming into that type of form, and then if you bring the Sicaris into it, obviously that would really, that would pique people's interest because that'd be interesting. I think that would be good stuff because it also
Yeah, it helps
proves,
add a lot of drama and character development into the storyline, having one of these members being part of the Sicari, right?
of
And
course,
not people not knowing who people are, and you know
and then a
and
lot of people.
and in fact our antagonist, his name is Gessius Florus. He's hanging around and he's got his own spies they keep sending into Jerusalem to find things out. And so we got the antagonist sending his spies into Jerusalem and the Sicari trying to assassinate some of them, so
Yeah, going against each other. I think that'd be really interesting. And then plus it's nice because there's a history of Jesus and Josephus kind of contends to
right. And
that.
so
So,
during the series, Jesus gets mentioned because they remember him, and Nicanor runs into Christians who are telling him about him. In fact, Nicanor at some one point ends up in Rome as one of the Praetorian guards. He's guarding the prison and runs into Paul, who's in prison.
oh wow.
So yeah.
Very interesting stuff. Well, I love it. So, all right, well, we're about at 45 minutes.
Yeah.
I always ask guests like the last 10 minutes because I have till about 7:30 because my kids will probably come down. Usually I start just a smidge earlier, but I don't want them to come and interrupt. But is there anything like the last 15 minutes that you like wanted to get out there that you wanted to talk about that you think is very important for the audience?
Well, we've touched on about all the points I can think of. So yeah, no, I'm starting to work on this book now, putting together the what I would call the rediscovering Herod's Temple Mount, right? All
Okay.
about how Josephus, all of the details he wrote about how the what the layout looked like.
Okay.
And currently, if you go to Israel, if you go to Jerusalem, you'll see lots of scale models where the entire Temple Mount sanctuary, they'll say, used to be Herod's Temple Mount. That
Okay.
used to be the sanctuary for the temple. And now people have seen this, the Dome of the Rock, this golden dome,
Yeah.
which sits there in the middle of it. The most popular view now is that that's where the temple sat. And this whole large rectangular sanctuary was what Herod had built. But that is not what Josephus tells us.
Oh wow.
Josephus tells us in many different places, in different ways, that the sanctuary was 600 feet on a side. And yeah, I also put on my website some of the history and some of especially like this paper that was written by Thomas Lewin that really brings out everything Josephus said about this and where it was. And so if you take a 600-foot square and put that in the southwest corner of today's Temple Mount, that is where Josephus describes this the temple sanctuary as being.
Okay. So a different
And
place than what they say now, right?
and that places the temple in an open area today between the Dome of the Rock and the Al-Aqsa Mosque.
So
In fact,
could
I walked up there. It's just it's bare ground under some trees. There's a fountain there. The Jews used to bring water up from the very large cisterns underneath the temple. They're there underneath the Temple Mount. They're still there
wow.
to wash away all of the blood, from the sacrifices. They needed a lot of water for that, and they brought them up from these cisterns. Well, that's where the cisterns are. They're in that under that part of the Temple Mount, not up under the Dome of the Rock. So,
Wow. So and they probably they won't go with Josephus's stuff because they think he's a
well, that's
traitor.
one of the, so yeah, that's interesting. That's one of the reasons
Yeah.
because the Talmud, that a lot of the Orthodox Jews follow as very sacred, also gives a description of the temple, but instead of being 600 feet at a side, it says 750 feet. So it gives a
Wow.
little bit different dimensions. So if they had to pick between the two, they're going to pick the Talmud
Of
because
course.
after all, Josephus was a traitor. We can't trust him. And most people, all of them that disagree will just say, well, Josephus got it wrong. I'm like, well,
Yeah,
yeah, but Josephus was there. He lived there and he walked around there. So how can we call the eyewitness wrong? And the
yeah.
people that lived 200 or 300 years later somehow, have the right dimension. So
And as an historian, he's trying to get everything completely accurate, or else he's going to be, or else all of
yeah,
his
yeah.
work is going to be put to the, going to be put
Right,
out.
right. If he
So
tells wrong numbers, people will point it out, right?
yeah, of course, yeah. And if you're
Well,
wrong
so
about something,
I've been to Jerusalem, and when you're around there, you can understand. You look at these four massive walls around this rectangle, and it's hard to believe that that's not exactly how it was laid out at the time.
yeah,
So, if you're an archaeologist, you're always putting, your priorities on what's still standing,
yeah,
not on what's written in some history book. So the archaeologist will lean toward, what they see on the ground, not what some historian wrote, right? So,
yeah, yeah. And damn, that's very interesting. That's good to bring up because they're technically wanting to build their third temple, right? And they're waiting to build it where the Dome of the Rock is when they
yeah,
could
and
have just
I
built it
grew up
where
in the
you're talking
sets.
about.
I grew up in the 70s and 80s, and everybody said, well, the Dome of the Rock's in the way. Maybe there's going to be a big earthquake, and it'll be destroyed. Then they'll rebuild the temple.
Yeah.
They don't need to wait, where the temple was is an open area right now. So not that
Wow.
I'm encouraging to do that, but
No,
there
no.
are Jews there that are ready to put that rocket, that cornerstone in place, right? So
They are, yeah. And I think our president right now is trying to assist on that happening, with Jared Kushner. So I
yeah,
think they have it all ready to go, which is very interesting. So we're in very interesting times, my friend.
we are. That's for sure, right?
Yeah, yes. All right, so we're close to ending. I think you did a fantastic job. I think that I love the fact that you have so much knowledge about this, and when you when you're a subject matter expert about something, that's what happens. I bring up one thing, and then you could just totally go off on it, and I love it.
Yeah.
It's great, man, to have that much knowledge. So all glory to God, for that.
Yes,
And then
absolutely.
okay, and then you got four books. You got four of them back there we could see. So Cry for
Yeah,
Jerusalem. I see that
yeah.
they're
That's them on the top shelf. They're in paperback. They're also on Kindle.
okay.
And I'd hired a British voice actor. He's narrated the whole series on Audible. So if you like
Awesome.
listening to them, you can do that as well.
Can you shout out? Okay, so your website is cryforjerusalem.com.
Cryforjerusalem.com. Yep.
Okay, perfect. So everybody that's listening, if you guys could go to cryforjerusalem.com, if you're interested in all this, he has blogs written kind of in different sections on the stuff that he's
Yeah,
talking
there's a
about.
blog section. There's dozens of blogs on lots of different topics. And yep.
Awesome. And then Lulia King, she's the one that kind of set this up, right?
Yeah, that's Front Gate Media, right, has
Okay.
been
Well,
helping me manage these. Yeah.
shout out to them. They've sent me a few people and they do a great job. So we want to shout them out also. And we appreciate you guys setting this up. And I really appreciate meeting you, Ward. Thank you.
Yeah, Josh, it's been fun.
Yeah, so like I always do, I like to end this in prayer. So let's do that. So, Father God, in
Okay.
the name of Jesus, we appreciate everything you do for us. Thank you very much for giving us this glorious time. And Lord, we're trying to kind of shed light on different things that happened back then that obviously we don't know about. And Josephus is one of the guys that that was there, and we just want to dig into that, Lord. But we just want to say, if you could, Lord, just protect Ward and assist him in everything he's trying to do. He's trying to make movies and also write books and about what he's kind of researched. So if you can assist him in making this happen, it seems like he's just trying to. He's a Christian, obviously, Lord, and he's just trying to bring this stuff to light. And he's very interested in these subjects, and like all of us are, when we get a glimpse into what's going on when our Lord and Savior was alive, then it kind of assists us into uh, learning about the Bible and putting it into context. So if you could assist Ward and also protect him and his family during these times, we know that there's a lot of people that wouldn't want something like this to come out because they don't want to believe Josephus because they feel like he's a traitor. But I think that Ward is just trying to, just expose what was happening at that time and do a good job of it. So just protect him, Lord. And just want to say thank you for everything you do for us. And we love you in Jesus' name. Amen. All
Amen.
right. Thank you very much. Everybody that's
Yeah.
listening, if you guys
Thanks for
could.
having me.
Yeah, like I said, go to his website and then also pick up his book. Four books. He's got
Four
four of
books.
them. All
Yeah.
right. So yeah, well, I really appreciate everybody listening. We thank you, and if you could subscribe to the YouTube Josh Monday Music and podcast, and then Ward, do you have any YouTube or social media you want to shout out?
Uh, No, there is a YouTube. There's like a two minute YouTube out there
Okay.
on Cry for Jerusalem trailer,
Okay.
where you can see just a 2 minute introduction to the books and what's behind them.
Okay, perfect. And obviously, once if you do make it into a movie, you're probably gonna have a
Well,
YouTube page
yeah,
for that.
there'll be a lot more to talk about if that goes down. We have a couple of directors in Israel who are already on board with us. So
Wow, awesome. All right, cool. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate you,
yeah,
Ward, and everybody that's listening. Thank you guys so much. If you guys could go to Spotify, leave a 5-star review, and also if you guys comment, anybody that's commented on Spotify, YouTube, I really appreciate all of you guys and everybody that's on Patreon. Thank you so much, and God bless you.